He found an abandoned widow with 3 kids living in a mud shack and made a decision that changed everything. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that button now and comment what city you're watching from, and get ready, because today's video is absolutely heartbreaking and has a completely shocking ending you won't believe. A millionaire YouTuber was driving down a dirt road in rural America when he saw something that made his heart stop. A woman with 3 children and a shack falling apart, and a story nobody expected. Stay with me until the end, because you'll understand everything. Jimmy was 28 years old and was the biggest YouTuber in the world, with 500 million subscribers and videos hitting billions of views, known for doing the biggest challenges on the internet. But today, he wasn't making a video, at least not officially. He was doing something he did every month in secret, testing humanity, looking for people who really needed help. Jimmy was driving his black pickup through dirt roads in the countryside, far from cameras and far from fame. Always searching for people who needed real help. Not for views, not for likes, but because he deeply believed in one thing: that kindness deserved to be rewarded, and good people deserved to have their lives changed. Next to him was Marcus, his best friend and producer for over 10 years, with hidden filming equipment, tiny cameras installed in the car, and discreet microphones hidden in clothes, filming everything but nobody knew, because that's how Jimmy liked to do it. Without fanfare, without warning, just pure kindness. Marcus looked out the window and sighed, saying, "Man, we've already driven 30 miles through these dirt roads, and there's nothing here. Just woods, dry trees, and dust. I don't think anything's going to happen today." But Jimmy kept driving in silence, looking carefully out the window, and responded with conviction, "There is, Marcus. There always is. You just have to look right. The people who need it most are the ones who appear the least. They stay hidden, ashamed of their situation." Marcus was going to respond something, but Jimmy suddenly hit the brakes, making the car stop abruptly, raising a cloud of red dust. Marcus looked startled, asking what happened, and Jimmy just pointed to the right side of the road without saying anything. In the middle of nowhere, between dry trees, twisted by the sun and tall weeds that seemed endless, there was a shack. No, shack was too generous a word for that thing. It was a ruin forgotten by time, with cracked mud walls that looked like they were about to collapse at any moment. The roof had more holes than shingles, and you could see the sky through the openings. The door was crooked, hanging by a rusty hinge that creaked in the wind, and the windows had no glass, just dark holes like empty eyes. In front of that structure that looked more like a horror movie set than a house, there was a woman. She was standing, holding a small child in her arms, and 2 other children were clinging to her dirty skirt tightly, as if afraid to let go. They were all dirty, with clothes torn and patched. So many times you could barely identify the original color. Skinny to the point you could see bones through skin, and with that scared look of someone who doesn't know what's going to happen. Jimmy turned off the car engine and sat still for a few seconds, just looking at that scene, trying to process what he was seeing. Marcus beside him was also silent, with his hand over his mouth and eyes already starting to turn red. Jimmy finally spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. "Stop the car, Marcus. We found it." Marcus looked at him and saw that Jimmy was also emotional. He questioned man there in that shack. "Are you sure? It looks dangerous," and Jimmy confirmed, nodding his head. "Now, Marcus, it's now or never." Jimmy opened the car door, slowly, trying not to make noise, and got out. The midday sun fell like molten lead on the dry earth, making the air shimmer from heat. The heat was suffocating, the kind that burns skin and dries throat in seconds. There was dust in the air that stuck to skin mixed with sweat, and that whole scene seemed like it came from a nightmare. A place forgotten by God and men where suffering was the only company. Jimmy started walking slowly toward the shack, stepping carefully on the dry ground full of rocks and thorns. He didn't want to scare those people who already seemed too scared of their own lives. Each step he took raised a small cloud of red dust that stuck to boots and pant legs. The woman saw Jimmy approaching and immediately pulled the children behind her in a protective, instinctive mother movement. Her eyes widened, full of pure fear, and she began to back away, slowly pushing the children with her toward the shack entrance, as if preparing to run or defend herself. Jimmy noticed the fear and stopped about 15 feet away, raising his hands slowly in a universal gesture of peace. He forced a gentle smile, trying to look as unthreatening as possible, and said in a calm, low voice, "Hello. Good morning. My name is Jimmy. Please don't be afraid of me. I didn't come here to do anything bad. I just want to talk a little if you'll let me." The woman didn't respond at all, just stood there looking at him with that expression of distrust mixed with terror, while holding the children even tighter. You could see her hands were shaking, and she was mentally calculating if she could grab all 3 kids and run inside the shack before Jimmy got close. Jimmy noticed the tension in the air and decided to stay put where he was without taking another step. He lowered his hands slowly and continued speaking with a soft voice. "Look, I know it must be scary for a stranger to show up here out of nowhere. I completely understand. But I promise I didn't come to do any harm. I was just passing by on the road there and saw you here, and thought I'd stop to see if everything's okay, if you need anything." The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable, broken only by the sound of hot wind, shaking dry trees, and making the crooked shack door creak. Jimmy waited patiently without pushing, giving the woman time to decide if she trusted him or not. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the woman spoke. Her voice came out low, hoarse, and full of shame, as if each word hurt to come out. "We're fine, sir. You don't need to worry. You can go. We don't want anything from anyone." Jimmy shook his head gently and gave a small, sad smile, responding, "I know you don't want anything from anyone. I can tell by your posture that you're a woman of great dignity. But let me ask you a question. Do you live here in this place?" The woman hesitated, biting her lower lip hard before responding quietly, "We do, sir. It's been 3 weeks since we got here." Jimmy felt his heart squeeze inside his chest, as if an invisible hand had grabbed and squeezed it. 3 weeks. 3 weeks in that place that looked more like a tomb than a house, with 3 small children. How could anyone survive in these conditions? He took a deep breath, trying to control his emotion, and asked, "Could I come in to see what it's like inside? I promise I won't take long and won't do anything to make you uncomfortable. I just want to understand your situation better." The woman looked at him for a long moment, studying Jimmy's face, trying to decide if he was a threat or if he could be someone different. Something in Jimmy's eyes must have seemed sincere, because after hesitating quite a bit, she gave a small nod agreeing and said, "You can come in, but please don't take too long. The children get nervous with strangers." Jimmy thanked with a nod and walked slowly toward the shack entrance. When he got close, he could see the children better, and their condition made his stomach turn. The oldest must have been about 6 years old and had brown hair all tangled full of knots and dirt. Her little face was dirty with earth, and you could clearly see the sunken eyes dark around them, as if she hadn't slept in days. Those eyes had a deep sadness that didn't belong in a child. It was the look of someone who had already seen and suffered too much for their age. The middle child was a boy about 4 years old who was clinging to the hem of his mother's worn dress with both small hands. He didn't say anything, just looked at Jimmy with fear and distrust. His lips were cracked from dehydration, and you could see he was trembling slightly, even in the unbearable heat. And the smallest of all was a baby that the woman held in her arms, couldn't be more than 2 years old, and was crying softly, making that weak, tired sound of someone who doesn't have energy left, even to cry properly. The baby's little head wobbled forward, as if he didn't have strength even to hold up his own neck. Jimmy entered the shack, and as soon as he passed through the crooked door, he had to hold his breath to not throw up right there. The smell was absolutely unbearable, and made eyes burn. It was a nauseating mixture of old mold, urine, wet mud, sweat, and dead animal that permeated the air and stuck in throat. If the outside was already horrible, the inside was 1,000 times worse. The floor was wet-packed dirt, uneven, full of holes and stones. There were huge, thick spider webs like dirty lace hanging in all corners of the ceiling, swaying gently with the draft coming through the holes. Rat droppings were scattered everywhere, especially in corners, and there were even rat footprints in the dust covering everything. The mud walls were cracked from top to bottom, with cracks so big you could stick your hand inside and see sunlight from the other side. There were dark moisture stains climbing the walls, indicating that when it rained, water came in everywhere, soaking everything. And in a more remote corner, there was a pile of dried, yellowed leaves and thin branches piled up, forming a kind of improvised bed. That's where the four of them slept, squeezed together, trying to warm up on cold days and protect themselves from moisture rising from the ground. Jimmy stood in the middle of that place, trying to process everything he was seeing, while feeling tears burning his eyes, threatening to fall. He had seen a lot of poverty over the years, doing this work of looking for people to help. But this was on a completely different level. This wasn't poverty. This was pure desperation. It was extreme suffering. It was the kind of situation that makes you lose faith in humanity and question how the world allows things like this to happen. He turned slowly to the woman who had entered behind him and still held the three children close, trying to protect them. Jimmy cleared his throat, trying to find the right words, and asked with a choked voice, "How did this happen? How did you get to this point? Please tell me the whole story from the beginning." The woman looked at the dirt floor with deep shame stamped on her face and began to speak with a low, trembling voice. "My name is Sarah, sir. My husband died 2 months ago in a work accident. He was working construction and fell from scaffolding that was poorly assembled. Died instantly without even a chance to say goodbye." She paused, wiping a tear that ran down, and continued, "His family never liked me because I was poor and without family. When he died, they kicked me out of the house where we lived, saying I had no right to stay there, that the space was theirs, and I had to leave and take the children with me." Jimmy felt anger rising in his chest and clenched his fists hard, asking, "And they didn't give you anything? No money, no help, nothing?" Sarah shook her head negatively and responded, "They gave me this, sir." She pointed around the shack with her free hand. "They gave me this place that was inheritance from my husband's father. They said it was a house in the countryside, and I could come live here. They handed me a dirty paper with a scribbled address and sent me away with the children, without even giving me time to get all our things. I had to gather what fit in 3 plastic bags and start walking." Her voice was getting weaker and more broken as she told the story. "We walked all day under the hot sun, sir, the children complaining about tiredness and thirst, but I couldn't stop because I had no money for bus or anything, so it was on foot, carrying the little one in my arms and pulling the other 2 by hand. When we finally got here in the late afternoon and saw this shack falling apart, I wanted to cry. Wanted to scream, wanted to die right there, because I realized this wasn't a house. It was a trap to kill me with shame and despair." She paused, taking a deep breath, trying to control herself, and continued, "But I had no choice, sir. Had nowhere to go. No relatives, no friends, no money, nothing. So I came in here with the children and tried to make it work. I cleaned what could be cleaned, gathered dry leaves to make an improvised bed, looked for water, and found a stream nearby so at least we wouldn't die of thirst." Jimmy listened to every word, feeling his chest tighten more and more. He asked, "And food, Sarah, how are you eating?" She looked at her children with that expression of deep pain that only a mother feels and responded at first, "Sir, I went into the woods and looked for fruit, roots, anything that could be eaten. I found some small, somewhat rotten cashews, some fallen mangoes, sometimes a bruised but still edible pawpaw. I gave everything to the boys and I kept only the leftovers. But now it's running out, because I've looked everywhere and there's nothing left." She paused and her voice failed completely when she said, "It's been 5 days since we've eaten anything real, sir. Just water from the stream and nothing else. 5 days. The word echoed in Jimmy's head like thunder. 5 days without food with 3 small children. How does anyone endure that? How does the body not give up? How does the heart not stop beating from pure desperation? This location Jimmy had found wasn't just any rural area. This was deep in Appalachia, in eastern Kentucky, in a forgotten town called Beattyville in Lee County, one of the poorest counties in all of America, a place the media never talks about, a place that doesn't appear on maps, a place where poverty is so extreme, it looks like a third world country, right here in the United States. Jimmy had been traveling the world looking for people to help. He had been to remote villages in Africa, to slums in South America, to poor neighborhoods in Asia. But when he researched and discovered that some of the worst poverty in the world was right here in his own country, in places like Beattyville, Kentucky, he knew he had to come here. He had to see it with his own eyes, and what he found was worse than he imagined. Beattyville is a town of less than 1,200 people, where the median household income is under $14,000 a year, where more than half the population lives below the poverty line, where there are no jobs, no opportunities, no hope, where people live in trailers and shacks without running water or electricity, where children go to bed hungry every night, where the opioid crisis has devastated entire families, where people feel forgotten and abandoned by their own country. Sarah and her 3 children were living in what used to be an old tobacco barn on the outskirts of Beattyville, completely isolated, miles away from the nearest neighbor, on a dirt road that barely anyone used anymore, in a structure that should have been condemned decades ago, and Jimmy had found them purely by chance, or maybe by divine intervention, driving down back roads looking for anyone who needed help. Jimmy looked at the children again, paying more attention to details now that he knew the whole story. The oldest girl, named Emma, according to what Sarah had told him, had glazed eyes staring at a fixed point on the floor, without blinking, as if in a trance. Her skinny little arms looked like 2 thin sticks that would break with any sudden movement, and you could clearly see protruding ribs through her worn blouse. She didn't say anything, just existed there like a silent little ghost who had given up complaining or asking for anything. The middle boy, named Noah, was trembling slightly, holding his mother's dress hem tightly, as if it were the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling around him. His lips were cracked, bleeding in some spots, and his tongue passed occasionally trying to moisten, but without success, because there wasn't enough saliva. He also didn't say anything, and Jimmy realized that silence wasn't just shyness, it was complete exhaustion. The body was conserving energy even to speak. And the baby in Sarah's arms named Liam was crying that weak, intermittent cry of someone who has no strength left. His little head wobbled forward, and his little eyes tried to close from exhaustion, but the discomfort of hunger wouldn't let him sleep properly. His skin had a somewhat yellowish tone, and the cheeks that should be chubby in a healthy baby were sunken, showing the shape of the skull underneath. Jimmy turned to Marcus, who was filming everything from outside trying to be discreet, and saw that his friend was crying openly with tears running down his face and the camera shaking in his hand. Marcus signaled with his head, confirming he was recording everything, and Jimmy took a deep breath, trying to compose himself because he needed to continue the conversation, even with a broken heart. He turned to Sarah and asked permission to ask some questions. She said he could, and Jimmy began. "Sarah, if I gave you money right now, $1,000, what would you do with that money?" The question caught her completely by surprise, and she widened her eyes, repeating incredulously, $1,000, sir. "That's right," Jimmy confirmed. $1,000 in your hand right now. What would you do?" Sarah looked at her children, then looked at Jimmy, and responded with a firm voice for the first time in the conversation. "I would buy food, sir. Lots of food. I'd buy rice, beans, meat, fruit, milk, bread, everything the children need, and give them food until they couldn't eat anymore. I wanted to see them eating until their little bellies got round like they're supposed to be in healthy children." Jimmy nodded and continued asking, "And if it were $10,000, Sarah, 10,000 in your hand, what would you do?" Her eyes widened even more, and she repeated, almost not believing, $10,000, sir. "That's a lot," Jimmy confirmed, nodding. "Yes, it's quite a bit of money, but tell me what you would do with 10,000. Sarah swallowed hard, thinking quickly, and responded, "With 10,000, I would rent a house, sir, A real house with brick walls, roof that doesn't leak, door that closes right and window with glass. I'd put beds for the children to sleep without being on hard ground. Buy new clothes because these are falling apart. Take them to the doctor to get exams and see if everything's okay, because it's been a long time since they've been to a doctor, and put them in school to study and have a better future than mine. Her voice broke at the end, showing all the contained emotion, and Jimmy let the silence hang for a few seconds before asking the next question. And if it were $100,000, Sarah, 100,000, what would you do with so much money? Sarah began to cry softly, shaking her head as if the question were too absurd to be real. $100,000, sir. I can't even imagine. That doesn't exist for poor people. Poor people don't even dream of money like that. But Jimmy insisted gently. But if it existed, Sarah, if I put $100,000 in your hand right now, what would you do? Tell me. Sarah stopped shaking her head and thought for a moment, wiping tears with the back of her hand, and finally responded. With $100,000, I wouldn't rent a house, sir, I'd buy one. I'd buy a simple little house, but one that was mine. That nobody could take from me ever, so my children would have a secure roof for the rest of their lives. I'd put them in the best school I could afford, give them good food every day, new clothes whenever they needed, medicine when they got sick. And if there was anything left, I'd open a small business, a little store, a hair salon, anything that would give me my own income so I'd never have to depend on anyone again and never go through this again. Jimmy smiled for the first time since arriving there and asked the final question, and if it were $1 million, Sarah, a whole million just for you, what would you do? Sarah stopped crying completely and looked at Jimmy as if he had spoken in a foreign language. She repeated slowly, trying to process $1 million, sir. $1 million doesn't exist for poor people. Poor people don't even know what that is, really. It's a number you see on TV but never gonna have in real life. Jimmy gave a gentle smile and insisted, but Sarah, let's imagine it exists. That I have $1 million here, and I'm going to give it to you. Tell me what you would do with all that money. Don't be ashamed, you can say whatever comes to mind. Sarah looked up through the holes in the roof as if seeking inspiration up there, then looked at the shack around her, then looked at her children who were there suffering with her, and finally looked back at Jimmy and began to speak slowly, choosing each word carefully. With $1 million, sir, I would give everything to my children. Everything I never had and everything they deserve to have. I'd buy a big, beautiful house with a room for each one, with a real bathroom, with a living room to receive visitors, with an equipped kitchen to make delicious food every day. I'd put them in the best private school that existed in this region, those expensive schools that rich people send their kids to, because my children are smart and deserve good education. She continued, gaining confidence in her voice. I'd buy them nice clothes, not these old patched clothes. No, new clothes from stores, good shoes that don't hurt feet, nice backpack to go to school, toys for them to play like normal children because children have to play, sir. Can't just be suffering like now. I'd take them to the doctor every month for complete checkups, to the dentist to take care of teeth, everything they needed to grow healthy and strong. Jimmy listened to every word, feeling his chest tight with emotion. But Sarah still wasn't finished. She looked at him with those eyes full of determination and continued. But you know what else I would do, sir? I would also help other people, other mothers who are going through what I'm going through, who were abandoned, who have nothing, who are suffering with their children. Because I know how bad this is. I know the pain of seeing your child hungry and not having anything to give. I know the desperation of not knowing if you'll survive to the next day. So I would help them too, because nobody deserves to go through what I went through. Nobody. Jimmy couldn't hold back anymore, and tears began to fall freely down his face. This woman in front of him with nothing. Absolutely nothing, starving along with 3 children, going through the worst moment of her life, still thought about helping other people when she had the means. This was the purest kindness he had ever seen in his entire life. This was proof that character has nothing to do with money, but with heart. Marcus outside was also crying openly without even trying to hide anymore. The camera kept recording everything, shaking a bit in his hand, but capturing every second of that historic moment. Jimmy quickly wiped the tears with the back of his hand and took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, because he needed to ask one more question. The most important of all. He looked into Sarah's eyes and asked with a choked voice, "Sarah, can I ask you one more question?" She nodded, saying, "You can, sir." And Jimmy asked, "Why didn't you give up Sarah? Why didn't you leave the children in a shelter and go try to rebuild your life alone? It would be much easier for you. You'd have more chances of getting a job, renting a room, starting over. Why did you choose to stay and suffer with them?" The question caught Sarah completely off guard, and she looked at Jimmy as if he had asked the most absurd question in the universe. She responded with a firm voice full of conviction. "Because they're my children, sir. A mother never abandons her child ever. No matter what happens, no matter how much it hurts, no matter if I'm gonna die of hunger or cold or anything else, mother stays, mother endures, mother fights until the last breath, because children need their mother." She continued with tears rolling, but voice still firm. "As long as I have a thread of life in me, these boys will have a mother, will have someone who loves them more than anything in the world, will have someone fighting for them even when it seems like there's no way out. Because that's what mothers do, sir. Mothers never give up. Mothers die trying but don't give up." Jimmy couldn't take it anymore and started crying right there in front of her without caring about hiding it. He cried because he had found something rare. He had found true love. He had found real courage. He had found the kindness he had been looking for so long. He cried from sadness about the situation, but also cried from joy because he knew he was going to be able to completely change that story. Sarah was confused seeing that strange man crying in front of her and asked, worried, "Are you okay, sir? Did something happen?" Jimmy wiped his tears and smiled through the tears, saying, "Everything's fine, Sarah. Everything's perfect, actually." He took a deep breath, getting air to speak, and said, "Sarah, I need to tell you something very important now." Sarah stood there looking at him, waiting without understanding anything, and Jimmy began to explain, "Sarah, I'm not just Jimmy. I'm a YouTuber. Do you know what that is?" Sarah shook her head negatively, saying she didn't know. Jimmy gave a sad smile and said, "Of course you don't know. You're living here without internet, without TV, without anything. How would you know?" He took his phone out of his pocket and opened the YouTube app, showing the screen to her. "Look here, Sarah. This is my channel. You see this number here? 500 million subscribers. That means 500 million people around the world watch me." Sarah looked at the screen, confused, trying to process that absurd number, and asked, "Is that a lot of people, sir?" Jimmy laughed and responded, "It's the whole world, Sarah. Half the planet watches me and follows me. And I do something very specific that I love to do. Every month I go out looking for people like you. Good people. People who need real help. And when I find these people, I completely change their lives." Sarah was starting to understand, but still afraid to believe that this was real. Jimmy continued speaking with an emotional voice. "And today, Sarah, I found you. I found the strongest woman I've ever seen in my entire life. A woman who went through hell and didn't give up. Who was abandoned by her husband's family and didn't surrender. Who went without food for 5 days and still keeps fighting for her children. Who, even with nothing, still thinks about helping other people when she has the means. You, Sarah, are the definition of true kindness." He paused, letting the words penetrate, and continued. "So I'm going to do something that will change everything for you and your children from now on." Sarah was paralyzed, unable to speak, and Jimmy turned to Marcus, shouting, "Marcus, call the team now. Send everything." Marcus was already on the phone dialing and spoke loudly. "Hello, guys. It's Marcus. We found it. Found a family that needs everything. Send food urgently, lots of food. Send clothes. Send a doctor to examine the children. Send the construction crew with all materials. Because we're going to tear down this shack and build a real house here. Send everything you have available. It's urgent, guys. These children haven't eaten in 5 days." Sarah heard all that without really understanding what was happening. She looked at Jimmy and asked with a trembling voice, "Sir, what are you talking about? What are you going to do?" Jimmy knelt in front of her, getting at eye level, and carefully took her hands. "Sarah, listen carefully to what I'm going to say now because it's very important. I'm going to give you a new house. A real house built from scratch right here in this same place. With 3 bedrooms, 1 for you and 1 for each child. With 2 complete bathrooms, big living room, equipped kitchen with stove, refrigerator and everything you need. Fenced yard for the kids to play. Everything new, all yours." Sarah's eyes widened, and she began to shake her head, repeating, "That doesn't exist, sir. You're joking with me, that can't be true." But Jimmy held her hands more firmly and said, looking into her eyes, "It's not a joke, Sarah. It's real. As real as you and I are here now. I'm going to build this house and more. I'm going to put $100,000 in your bank account so you never go without again. So you can buy food, clothes, everything you need without having to depend on anyone." Sarah began to tremble from head to toe, and tears began to pour from her eyes like an overflowing river. She fell to her knees on the dry ground, still holding the baby carefully so as not to hurt him, and began to sob loudly, saying between sobs, "That can't be true, sir. God doesn't do miracles like this. I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything to deserve it." Jimmy also knelt, getting at her level, and said with a firm but emotion-filled voice, "You do deserve it, Sarah. You and your children deserve everything good this world can offer. You went through a hell that nobody should go through. You fought tooth and nail to keep your children alive even with nothing. That's heroism, Sarah. That's the purest love that exists, and heroism and love deserve to be rewarded." The children, seeing their mother cry and fall to her knees, also started crying, without really understanding what was happening. Emma, the oldest, hugged her mother from behind with her skinny little arms. Noah clung to her side, trembling, and baby Liam cried in her lap, mixing his tears with hers. Jimmy continued speaking because he needed Sarah to understand everything, and there's more, Sarah, much more. I'm going to pay for private school for your 3 children, the best school in the region, with uniforms, school supplies, lunch, everything included. They're going to study in a rich kids' school and have the same future that rich kids have the right to have. Sarah couldn't speak anymore, just cried and shook her head, not believing it. Jimmy smiled and gave the last news. "And to finish, I'm going to give you a car. Sarah, a new car for you to take the children to school, go shopping at the market, take them to the doctor when needed, have independence and freedom to come and go." Sarah finally managed to speak through the sobs and asked the only thing that made sense to ask at that moment. "Why, sir? Why are you doing all this for me? I'm nobody. I'm just a poor woman that nobody wants. Why would you spend so much money on me?" Jimmy smiled with tears in his eyes and responded with the most sincere voice he had. "Because you're not nobody, Sarah. You're somebody. You're special. You're an example of strength and courage. And because I can do this, I have money, I have structure, I have a team. So if I can help, and don't help, what kind of person am I? You taught me today that true kindness is thinking about others, even when you have nothing. So I'm practicing the kindness you taught me." He paused and concluded, "You didn't do anything, Sarah. You did everything. You survived, and that's already a lot. You kept your children alive in impossible conditions, and that's a miracle. You deserve everything I'm going to give you, and much more." Marcus shouted from outside, interrupting the moment. "Jimmy, the team is arriving in an hour. They're already coming with food, doctor, and everything else, and the construction crew starts tomorrow morning." Jimmy stood up and helped Sarah stand up too. He carefully wiped her tears and said with a smile, "In an hour, food arrives here, lots of food, and your children will eat until they can't anymore. And tomorrow construction on the new house begins. In 2 weeks, everything's ready, and you move into the new house." Sarah looked at him, trying to process that this was real. It wasn't a dream or hunger hallucination. It was real. That man was serious. He was going to change her life for real. She looked at the shack around her, looked at her children who were clinging to her, looked at Jimmy again, and simply collapsed, fell on the dirt ground with the children, and started crying and screaming at the same time. She screamed, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, my God. Thank you, Sir Jimmy," alternating between thanking God and thanking Jimmy, while the children cried along without understanding, but feeling that something had definitely changed. Jimmy and Marcus also cried. Marcus filmed everything with the camera shaking in his hand because he was too emotional to hold it steady. That was the most beautiful and saddest moment at the same time they had ever witnessed in years doing this work of helping people. Exactly 1 hour later, as promised, 3 large vans arrived, raising dust on the dirt road. The doors opened, and people started getting out carrying boxes and more boxes of food. The first van had non-perishable items: rice, beans, pasta, oil, salt, sugar, coffee, crackers, everything in industrial quantities. The second van had fresh fruits, apples, bananas, oranges, grapes, watermelon, everything clean and beautiful, and meat. Lots of meat. Chicken, beef, pork, vacuum-sealed and refrigerated. And the third van had ready-made products: fresh bread, milk, cheese, ham, juice, soda, chocolate, everything kids love. Sarah saw all that being unloaded and brought near the shack and couldn't believe her own eyes. It was food. Lots of food. More food than she had seen together in her entire life. Tears kept falling, but now mixed with a smile. Marcus organized everything and called Sarah. "Look, Sarah, first. We're going to give food to the kids, but slowly, because the doctor said that people who go a long time without eating can't eat too much at once, or it's bad for the stomach. So we're going to give it little by little, okay?" Sarah agreed, nodding her head, and the doctor who had come along approached, introducing himself. "Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Wilson, and I came to examine the children, and you too, if you'll let me." Sarah was so emotional she couldn't speak properly. Just nodded. Yes. The doctor started examining baby Liam first, since he was in the most worrying condition. After a few minutes of examination, he shook his head seriously and said, "This baby has severe malnutrition, dehydration, and beginning of pneumonia. Needs urgent hospitalization to get IV fluids, antibiotics, and be monitored." Sarah widened her eyes, terrified, and shouted, "No, Sir Doctor, please don't take my son, I beg you. I'll do anything, but don't take him." The doctor held her shoulders gently and explained, "Calm down, Mom. I understand your fear, but it's for his good. If he doesn't go to the hospital now, he could get much worse and the situation could become grave. I don't want to scare you, but pneumonia in a malnourished baby is very serious." Jimmy approached and put his hand on Sarah's shoulder, saying, "Sarah, trust the doctor. He knows what he's doing, and I promise you're going with him to the hospital. I won't separate you. I'll pay for a private room for you to stay together, and you'll be by his side the whole time. But he needs urgent treatment." Sarah looked into Jimmy's eyes, seeing sincerity there, then looked at the baby in her lap, who was too weak, and made the hardest decision of her life. "Okay," she said with a weak voice. "You can take him, but I'm going too." Jimmy smiled and said, "Of course you're going. I already called a private ambulance that's coming, and while you're at the hospital with Liam, I'll take care of Emma and Noah here. I'll give them food, clean clothes, a bath, everything they need." Sarah hesitated again, because she was afraid to leave the other 2 children. What if it was a trick? What if it was a lie? What if when she came back they were gone? Jimmy noticed the fear and said, looking into her eyes, "Sarah, I know it's hard to trust, but I promise you by my mother who's in heaven that I won't do any harm to your children. You can go peacefully to the hospital, take care of Liam, and I'll take care of the other 2, as if they were mine. When you come back, they'll be here clean, fed, and happy." Sarah finally agreed, and 10 minutes later the ambulance arrived. She got in holding the baby, and went to the hospital with Dr. Wilson and a nurse. Jimmy stayed there with Emma and Noah, who were scared seeing their mother leave. Jimmy crouched down, getting at their level, and said with a gentle voice, "Hi, Emma. Hi, Noah. My name is Jimmy, and I'm your mom's friend. She went to take your little brother to the doctor, but she's coming back. Meanwhile, you're going to stay here with me, and I'm going to take good care of you." Okay. Emma looked at him with distrust and asked with a thin, weak voice, "Is Mom really coming back, or are you lying?" Jimmy smiled and responded, "She's coming back. Yes, I promise. And you know how I know. Because mothers never abandon their children. Your mom loves you more than anything in the world, and she's coming back soon." Noah, who hadn't spoken in days, finally opened his mouth and asked quietly, "Are we going to eat?" Jimmy felt his heart squeeze with the question and responded, "Of course you're going to eat. You're going to eat everything you want. But first, let's do this. Let's give you a bath, put on clean clothes, and then we eat like kings. Okay?" Marcus had already prepared everything, had gotten clean water from the stream and heated it on an improvised stove, had separated new clothes the children's size that had come in one of the vans, and had prepared clean towels. Jimmy bathed the two children carefully. The water was warm, and he used fragrant soap and shampoo. Emma and Noah had never felt clean, warm water like this. It had always been cold stream water without soap. They closed their eyes, feeling that moment as if it were a dream. Jimmy scrubbed carefully, removing all the accumulated dirt, washed the tangled hair, patiently untangling the knots, rinsed everything and wrapped them in soft towels. After the bath, he dressed them in new clothes, brand new jeans, soft cotton t-shirt, real sneakers that didn't hurt feet, clean socks, everything new still with tags. Emma looked at her own clothes and started crying. Jimmy asked, worried, "What's wrong?" "Emma, why are you crying?" She responded, sobbing, "It's just that I've never had new clothes, sir. It was always old clothes I got as donations." "Are these clothes really mine?" Jimmy hugged her and said, "Of course they're yours. They're all yours, and nobody's going to take them from you ever." Noah looked at his own sneakers, fascinated. He kept lifting his foot, looking from all angles, and pressed the side to see if it was really soft. He smiled for the first time since his father had died, a small but real smile that lit up his thin little face. After they were dressed, Jimmy took them near the food boxes and said, "Now let's eat. But remember, I said we have to go slowly because it's bad to eat too much at once when you've gone a long time without eating. So I'm going to prepare a plate for each of you, and you eat slowly, chewing." Well, okay. He prepared a simple but nutritious plate: fluffy white rice, beans cooked with light seasoning, shredded and cooked chicken to be soft, and a small piece of banana for dessert. He put the plates in the children's hands, and they looked at the food as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Emma picked up the spoon with her hand shaking and brought the first bite to her mouth. As soon as the rice touched her tongue, tears started falling again. She chewed slowly and cried at the same time, cried from happiness, from relief, from gratitude. Jimmy asked, "Is it good, Emma?" and she nodded affirmatively without being able to speak because she was too emotional. Noah ate in silence, as always, but with shining eyes. He ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the last meal of his life. After finishing the rice and beans, he looked at the chicken and asked quietly, "Can I eat the meat too?" Jimmy smiled and said, "Of course you can. Eat everything on the plate, it's all yours." After they finished eating, Jimmy gave them clean, fresh water to drink and asked, "Do you want dessert?" The two looked at him without understanding. Jimmy explained, "Dessert is a sweet that we eat after salty food. I brought banana, apple, and chocolate. Do you want?" Noah's eyes shone when he heard chocolate, and he asked with a voice full of hope, "Real chocolate, sir? That dark one that's sweet?" Jimmy laughed and said, "Real chocolate, yes." He took a milk chocolate bar, broke it into small pieces, and gave one to each, when Noah put the chocolate in his mouth and felt the taste of it melting. He closed his eyes, and a huge smile opened on his face. Emma also smiled, eating the chocolate slowly, making it last as long as possible. After eating, they sat there in the shade of a tree, resting with their bellies for the first time in a long time, not hurting from emptiness. Jimmy sat with them and started talking. "Emma, do you like to study?" She responded quietly. "I used to like it, sir. But it's been a long time since I've been to school," Jimmy asked. "And what did you like to do most at school?" she thought, and responded, I like to read. The teacher let us get storybooks, and I loved reading about princesses and castles. Jimmy smiled and said, Then you're going to like the new school I'm going to put you in. It's a school that has a huge library full of storybooks, princess books, everything you can imagine. Her eyes shone with hope, and she asked, Really, sir? Jimmy confirmed, really. You'll be able to read as many books as you want. He turned to Noah and asked, And you, Noah, what do you like to do? Noah, who spoke so little, thought a lot before responding quietly. I like to draw, sir. I used to draw in the dirt with sticks, but I didn't have paper or pencil. Jimmy felt his heart squeeze again, and said then, At the new school, you'll have notebooks, colored pencils, crayons, everything you need to draw as much as you want, and you know what else. I'm going to buy a bunch of paper and pencils for you to draw here at home, too. Noah looked at him with those wide eyes full of hope and asked, Are you really going to do all this? You're not lying to us. Jimmy put his hand on his shoulder and said, looking into his eyes, I'm not lying, Noah. Everything I said is going to happen. The new house will be built. You'll have good school, food every day, new clothes, everything. I promise. Emma, who was listening to everything, asked, But why are you doing this? We're nothing to you. Jimmy thought about the best way to explain to children and said, You and your mom are special people, good people, people who deserve good things in life, and I have the means to help, so I help. Simple as that. You don't have to be anything to me for me to want to see you happy. Emma hugged Jimmy, suddenly catching him by surprise, and said quietly in his ear, Thank you, Uncle Jimmy. You're an angel that God sent for us. Jimmy hugged her back, feeling tears burning his eyes again, and responded, I'm no angel, Emma. I'm just a person who wants to help. They stayed there the rest of the afternoon, talking, playing, laughing. It was the first time in months those children really laughed. Jimmy told funny stories, clowned around, played guessing games, did everything to see them happy, and it worked. The laughter echoed in that place that before only had sadness. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sarah was sitting next to the bed where baby Liam was hospitalized. He had an IV in his tiny arm, oxygen mask on his little face, and various machines beeping around. Sarah held his little hand carefully, so as not to disturb the wires, and cried quietly. Dr. Wilson had explained that the condition was serious, but with proper treatment, he would recover completely. He just needed to stay hospitalized for about 3 or 4 days, taking medication and being monitored. Sarah looked at her son and asked forgiveness in her thoughts. Forgiveness for not being able to feed him properly. Forgiveness for letting him get to that state. Forgiveness for not being a better mother. Tears fell, wetting his little hand. But she didn't let go, stayed there holding as if it were the only thing that mattered in the world. A nurse entered the room with a plate of food and said gently, You need to eat too, ma'am. I brought food for you. Sarah looked at the plate but shook her head, saying, I'm not hungry, the nurse insisted. Mom, you need to eat to have strength to take care of your baby. He needs you strong and healthy. Eat at least a little bit, please. Sarah looked at the plate again and saw it had rice, beans, steak, and salad. Real food, hot and fragrant. Her stomach rumbled loudly from hunger, but even so she hesitated. The nurse noticed and asked, What's wrong, Mom? Why don't you want to eat? Sarah responded with a voice full of shame. It's that I don't know if I'll be able to pay for this food. I already owe the whole hospital. Don't want to owe even more. The nurse smiled kindly and explained, Mom, you don't owe anything. Everything's paid for. The man Jimmy who brought you here paid everything in advance. Private room, doctor, medicine, food, everything. You won't pay a cent so you can eat peacefully. Sarah looked at the plate with tears in her eyes, picked up the fork with a trembling hand and ate slowly, savoring each bite. It had been 5 days since she had eaten anything solid, and that simple food seemed like a king's banquet. She ate and cried at the same time, thanking God and Jimmy for that miracle. 3 days passed, and Liam improved a lot with treatment. The fever had gone down. Breathing had normalized, and he was already nursing better. Dr. Wilson discharged him, saying he could go home, but needed to continue taking antibiotics for 1 more week. Sarah thanked emotionally and picked up the baby to leave. When she got back to where the shack used to be, Sarah couldn't believe what she saw. The shack had completely disappeared. It had been demolished, and in its place there was a huge concrete foundation with thick iron bars sticking up. There were at least 20 men working, some building brick walls, others preparing mortar, others carrying materials. It was an anthill of people working hard under the hot sun. Jimmy saw her arrive and ran to receive her. "Sarah, how are you? How's Liam?" She smiled tiredly and said, "I'm fine, Jimmy. Liam improved a lot thanks to God and you. The doctor said he's going to be completely fine." Jimmy smiled, relieved, and said, "Great. What good news. Now come see what we've already done here in these 3 days." He took Sarah near the construction and explained, "Look, Sarah, here's going to be the living room. Really big with space for sofa, TV, and dining table. Here on the side will be the equipped kitchen, and back there are 3 bedrooms. This one is yours, this is Emma's, and this is Noah and Liam's. There are 2 bathrooms, one here and another there. Everything with flooring, tiles, everything done right." Sarah looked at all that in a state of shock. In 3 days, the whole structure was ready. The walls were going up fast. You could see the shape of the house taking form. She asked incredulously, "How long until it's ready, Jimmy?" He responded, smiling. "In 10 more days, everything's ready. Painted, with furniture, with everything. Then you move into the new house." Sarah started crying again because this still seemed too surreal to be true. Jimmy put his arm around her shoulders and said, "Sarah, stop thinking it's a lie. It's real. In 10 days, you'll be living in a real house with your children safe, fed, and happy. Believe it." She nodded, wiping her tears, and asked, "And where are Emma and Noah?" Jimmy pointed under a tree where the 2 children were sitting, drawing in new notebooks with colored pencils. Sarah ran to them and hugged them both tightly. They also hugged her, saying they had missed her. Sarah looked at them and saw they were different, clean, with new clothes, well fed. Their eyes had come back to shine and they were smiling. Emma told excitedly, "Mom, Uncle Jimmy gave us good food every day, gave us warm baths, gave us new clothes, and look, he gave us notebooks and colored pencils to draw." She showed the drawings she had made, drawings of beautiful houses, of happy family, of shining sun. Sarah looked at those drawings and saw hope there, saw future, saw life. Noah also showed his drawings that were more detailed. He had natural talent for drawing, and Jimmy had noticed, had bought more materials for him and encouraged him to keep drawing. Noah was radiant, showing each drawing to his mom and explaining what it was. Sarah hugged them both again and said, crying, "My children, I love you so much. Mom promises we'll never go through what we went through again. Never." The next 10 days were of complete transformation. Sarah and the children stayed in a simple hotel that Jimmy paid for while the house was being built. Every day Jimmy took them to see the progress of the construction, and every day there was news. One day the walls were finished, another day the roof was put on, another day painting started, another day furniture arrived, and finally on the 10th day, the house was completely ready. Jimmy blindfolded Sarah and the children to make it a surprise, took them to the front of the house and said, "You can open your eyes now." Sarah took off the blindfold and saw a beautiful house painted light yellow with white windows, varnished wooden door, fenced yard with green grass and some small trees planted. There was even a swing and a colorful slide on the side. The children screamed with joy and ran out to explore the yard. Sarah stood there looking at it, unable to move. Jimmy asked, "Want to see inside?" She nodded, still unable to speak, and they went in. The living room was spacious with a large, comfortable sofa, new TV installed on the wall, coffee table, beautiful curtains on the windows, everything matching perfectly. The kitchen was equipped with a brand new stove, large refrigerator, stainless steel sink, cabinets full of pots, plates, cups, everything needed to cook, and when Sarah opened the refrigerator, she saw it was loaded with food, had everything. The bedrooms were perfect. Sarah's room had a double bed with new mattress, wardrobe, nightstand, lamp, fragrant bed linens. Emma's room had a single bed with pink bedspread that she loved. Had a little table to study with chair. Shelf full of princess storybooks that Jimmy had bought, knowing she liked them. The boys' room had bunk beds because Noah had asked to sleep on top and leave the bottom for Liam when he grew up. Also had a huge box of educational toys. The bathrooms were complete with glass shower enclosure, hot shower, sink, toilet, mirror, everything clean and fragrant. Sarah entered each room touching the walls as if wanting to make sure they were real, sat on the bed and sank into the soft mattress, opened the wardrobe and saw there were new clothes for her too. Went into the bathroom and turned on the shower, feeling the warm water fall on her hand. She came back to the living room where Jimmy was waiting and simply collapsed, crying on the floor. Cried so much her whole body shook. Jimmy knelt beside her, and she clung to him, saying between sobs, "Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you so much. You saved my life, saved my children. I have no way to thank you for everything you did. I'll never forget this as long as I live. Never." Jimmy hugged her, letting her cry as much as she needed, and said quietly in her ear, "You don't need to thank me, Sarah. You just need to be happy from now on. Raise your children with love. Teach them to be kind like you are. And when you have the means, pass this kindness forward, helping other people. That's all I ask." Sarah pulled away a bit, wiping her tears, and said with a firm voice, "I promise, Jimmy. I swear I'll help other people. I'll pass this kindness forward, and I'll teach my children to do the same." Jimmy smiled and said, "Then my mission here is complete." He took a folder he had brought and handed it to her, saying, "Here are all the house documents. Everything's in your name. The house is yours. Nobody can take it from you ever. There's also proof of the $100,000 I deposited in your account. The account number is here. You can go to the bank tomorrow and confirm." Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands and saw the papers. Everything really was in her name. She owned that house, had $100,000 in her account. This wasn't a dream, it was reality. Jimmy continued, "And tomorrow morning, a private driving instructor I hired is coming here. He'll give you driving lessons every day for a month. At the end of the month, you get your driver's license, and I deliver the car I promised." Sarah didn't even know what to say anymore, just looked at him with infinite gratitude stamped on her face. Jimmy stood up to leave and said, "Sarah, my work here is done. From now on, it's up to you, but I'll keep following from afar. Anything you need, just call me at this number." He handed her a card with his phone number. "Take good care of your children and be very happy." He started walking toward the door, but Sarah called him. "Jimmy, wait." He turned and she asked, "When can I see the video you made? I want to see the whole story told." Jimmy smiled and said, "I'm releasing the video in 3 months. When I release it, I'll send you the link. You can watch and show your children when they're older so they can understand what happened." They hugged one more time, and Jimmy left, leaving Sarah there with the 3 children in the new house. She closed the door and looked around, taking a deep breath. She was home. A real home. Her home. And she would never leave there again, would never go hungry again, would never suffer like that again. That night, Sarah bathed all 3 children in the warm shower, dressed them in new pajamas, gave them a delicious dinner, and put each one in their own bed, kissed each one's forehead, and told them how much she loved them. Emma slept, hugging a princess book. Noah slept with a drawing he had made taped to the wall beside his bed, and Liam slept peacefully in the comfortable crib, breathing without difficulty. Sarah went to her own room, lay on the soft bed, covered herself with the fragrant blanket, and for the first time in a long time, slept in peace. Slept knowing she was safe, that her children were safe, that she had a future ahead. Slept and dreamed of good things. In the following months, Sarah's life changed completely. She learned to drive and got her license. Jimmy kept his promise and delivered a brand new car to her. The children started at the private school Jimmy had paid for and were loving it. Emma had access to the huge library and read a new book every week. Noah participated in art classes and discovered he really had talent for drawing. Liam grew healthy and strong with regular medical follow-up. Sarah used part of the money Jimmy had given her to take a culinary course because she always liked to cook. After the course, she started making cakes and sweets at home and selling to the neighborhood. It was just to have an income, but it ended up becoming a real business because everything she made was delicious. People started ordering birthday cakes, party sweets, savories, and Sarah needed to hire a helper. 5 years passed and Sarah was unrecognizable. She had opened a small store called Sarah's Sweets in the center of Beattyville, had 3 employees, made good money, and could pay all bills with money left over. The children grew. Emma was 11 years old and was the best student in class, wanting to be a doctor when she grew up. Noah, at 9, had won a drawing contest at school and dreamed of being an architect. Liam, at 7, was the most talkative of the 3 and said he wanted to be a YouTuber like Uncle Jimmy. Sarah never forgot the promise she had made. Every month, without fail, she set aside 10% of the store's profit and looked for someone who needed help, gave food baskets to families going through need, paid overdue electric bills so they wouldn't be cut off, bought school supplies for children who didn't have any. Whenever she helped someone, she left a handwritten note saying, "Someone helped me when I needed it most. Now I help you, when you can pass this kindness forward." The people who received Sarah's help were moved, and many kept the promise. When they managed to stabilize themselves, they also started helping others, creating a chain of kindness that spread throughout the entire town. 10 years after that day, when Jimmy had found her in the shack, Sarah was in a large auditorium. Jimmy had organized a conference about kindness and had invited her to attend. When Sarah entered the auditorium, she saw there were 3,000 people sitting waiting. She looked for Jimmy with her eyes and saw him on stage. When he saw her, he waved and asked security to bring her to the front. Jimmy started speaking into the microphone, telling about the work he did, helping people. He told several stories but stopped when he got to Sarah's. He said, "And there's a story that changed my life. As much as it changed the life of the person I helped. It's the story of a mother with 3 children that I found 10 years ago, living in a mud shack without food for 5 days." The huge screen behind him started playing the video from that day, showing Sarah thin and scared, the children hungry, the horrible shack, the whole conversation, the transformation, everything. Sarah watched from the front row, with tears streaming, remembering everything. When the video ended, Jimmy said, "This woman taught me something I'll never forget. She taught me that true kindness is thinking about others even when you have nothing. And she's here today. Sarah, can you come up here, please?" Sarah went up on stage, trembling with nerves, while the 3,000 people applauded, standing. Jimmy hugged her and said into the microphone, "Sarah, how are you today, 10 years later?" She took the microphone with trembling hand and responded, "I'm good, Jimmy. Very good, thanks to you. I have my store. My children are studying and happy. I'm living a dream I didn't even know I could dream." Jimmy smiled and asked, "And did you keep that promise you made?" Sarah smiled and responded, "I did. Every month for 10 years I've been helping someone. I've helped over 100 families in that time, and many of them also started helping others. The kindness you gave me multiplied, Jimmy." The audience applauded even louder, and Jimmy said, "You see, folks, this is proof that kindness doesn't end. It multiplies. Sarah received help and passed it forward. Those she helped also passed it forward, and that's how kindness grows and changes the world one person at a time." After the conference, Sarah and Jimmy talked more privately. She thanked him again, saying she would never forget what he did. Jimmy said she didn't need to thank him anymore because she had already repaid by helping so many people. They hugged, and each went their way, continuing to do good wherever they went. 20 years after that historic day, Jimmy was 48 years old and had created the Jimmy Institute, an organization that helped thousands of families every year, building houses, paying for school, providing jobs, changing lives on an industrial scale. Sarah, at 52, was the director of the Mothers Program at the Institute, helping hundreds of women who went through the same situation she had gone through. Sarah's children grew up and realized their dreams. Emma, at 26, had graduated from medical school. and worked in poor communities, treating people for free because she wanted to give back everything they had received. Noah, at 24, had graduated in architecture and worked for the Institute, designing beautiful, functional, affordable housing for poor families. Liam, at 22, was a YouTuber with 20 million subscribers and made videos helping people exactly like Uncle Jimmy did. One day in an interview on Liam's channel, the interviewer asked, "Liam, why do you make these help videos? Why not make gaming or challenge videos that get more views?" Liam thought and responded honestly, "When I was 2 years old, I was starving in a shack in the middle of nowhere, and a man I didn't even know stopped and saved my life. Saved my mom, saved my siblings, gave us everything we needed, without asking for anything in return, just out of pure kindness. So I make these videos because I want to pass that kindness forward, because someone did it for me, so now it's my turn to do it for others." The interview went viral, and Liam gained 5 million more subscribers in a week. People loved the story and loved seeing real kindness happening. Years passed, and Sarah kept aging, but continued working at the Institute, helping mothers. Until at 68, she started feeling strong pains. Went to the doctor and received devastating news. Aggressive cancer. Doctors gave her 6 months to live. Sarah received the news with surprising serenity, called her 3 children, and told them. They all cried. But Sarah said calmly, "I lived a good life. I was happy. I saw you grow up and realize your dreams. I helped many people. I have nothing to complain about. When God calls me, I'll go in peace." She called Jimmy, telling him the news, and he visited her immediately. When he arrived at the hospital and saw Sarah lying in bed, thin and fragile again, but this time from illness, he couldn't take it and cried, "Sarah, no. It can't be. You're strong. You'll beat this." Sarah smiled weakly and took his hand, saying, "Jimmy, my mission here is complete. I did what I came to do, raised my children, helped who I could, lived happily thanks to you. Now it's time to rest." Jimmy held her hand tightly and said, "But I don't know how to do this without you." "You inspire me every day," Sarah said. "Yes, you do. You've always been stronger than you imagine, and besides, there are so many people to continue, my children. The mothers I helped, they'll all continue the kindness. It doesn't end with me." Sarah lived 3 more months fighting bravely. In the last days, Emma, Noah, and Liam stayed at the hospital with her all the time, along with Jimmy. They talked, remembering good stories, laughing at funny things, crying with emotion. Until one peaceful morning, Sarah closed her eyes, holding her children's and Jimmy's hands, and passed away in peace. The funeral was immense. Thousands of people attended. There were important people like the mayor and governor, but there were also hundreds of mothers Sarah had helped over the years, who came to thank one last time. Each one brought a white rose and placed it on the casket. By the end of the wake, the casket was completely covered with roses. Jimmy gave the funeral speech with a choked voice, saying, "Sarah taught me the greatest lesson of my life. She taught me that kindness isn't about how much you have, but about how much you give. She never had much, but always gave everything she could. She transformed not only her own life, but thousands of lives by passing kindness forward. Today, we mourn the loss. But we also celebrate a life well lived, a life of love, courage, and generosity. Sarah, rest in peace, knowing your legacy will continue forever through all of us you inspired." Everyone present cried and applauded at the same time. Sarah was buried in a beautiful cemetery that Jimmy had paid for. The grave had a simple headstone that said, "Sarah, 1963-2031, mother, friend, example of kindness, who transformed the world one person at a time." 3 years later, Jimmy also passed away at 61 from sudden cardiac arrest while sleeping. It was quick and painless. When the news spread, the world stopped. Tributes came from all continents, presidents, celebrities, ordinary people, all mourning the loss. The funeral was broadcast live and watched by 1 billion people. Jimmy was buried next to Sarah, as he had requested. His headstone said, "Jimmy, 1995-2056. YouTuber, philanthropist, example of kindness, who changed millions of lives and taught the world to be better. Today, 40 years after that day, when Jimmy found Sarah, their legacy continues alive and strong. The Renassa community where the shack used to be has grown and become a complete town of 50,000 inhabitants with 3 hospitals, 15 schools, a university, markets, businesses, everything built on the principles of kindness and solidarity that Sarah and Jimmy defended. There nobody lives on the street. No child goes hungry. No family is homeless because the entire community helps each other. The Jimmy Institute continues operating in 50 countries, helping 100,000 families per year. Emma, at 66, is the president of the Institute and continues Uncle Jimmy and her mother's work with the same dedication. Noah, at 64, has designed over 1,000 affordable housing units spread across the country, giving decent housing to thousands of families. Liam, at 62, has the largest help channel on YouTube with 500 million subscribers and continues making videos inspiring new generations to practice kindness. And so ends the story of how a millionaire YouTuber stopped one random day on a dirt road in Beattyville, Kentucky, found a widow with 3 children in a mud shack starving, and made the decision to change everything. That decision didn't just change 4 lives, but millions of lives over decades, because kindness never ends. It just multiplies, spreads, perpetuates from generation to generation. And it all started with one stop, one look, one choice to see suffering and do something about it, proving that one single person really can change the world when they act with love, compassion, and genuine generosity.